I had no plans of being an entrepreneur. It was really more because I was burned out. Game development can be really difficult sometimes with a lot of crunch. And I asked a coworker out for a beer, and I told him that night, I was like, I'm done with games. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm really, really burned out. And I actually told him, like, I just want to be a Starbucks barista. Like, I just want to make coffee. Like, I had gone to the Starbucks website to look for openings. I was like, I was ready to leave. And then he said, okay, before you do that, if I start a company tomorrow to make games, would you join me? And I said, you have my resume. Like, let's go. I'll do it with you.
Welcome to the Rise and Play podcast. I am Sophie Vaux, your host and leadership coach. In the show, my wonderful co-host and I sit down with influential and diverse leaders from the gaming industry to hear about their leadership journey. Not the well-polished stories, but the real stories. The up and down, the breakthrough, and the failures. Or should we rather say learnings? Each episode will transport you into a magical space of vulnerability with our guest. And together, you'll be reminded that no matter how hard it is, you are not alone in this journey and find the courage to keep going. Come and join the ride. Let's begin. A former product leader who worked 16 years in the gaming industry, I know how difficult it is to get reliable and usable player insights. The logistics of scheduling, recruiting the right players, collecting and reviewing feedback, it is all time away from game development. But you know how fundamental it is to test assumptions with your core audience and iterate at a lower cost before marketing an unproven game. I am proud to announce Playtest Cloud as our key partner, as I have believed since day one in the quality of their service and their mission to democratize player research. Playtest Cloud can take the hassle out of organizing game research yourself and delivers results within 48 hours, allowing you to implement changes in time for your release. Having been a long-time user of the platform, it is the industry standard used by top AAA and mobile studios, and now they also support indie developers with special pricing. Working for a year on the wrong game is an expensive mistake, and you can de-risk it now by investing in your player research. Check out the show notes for a free trial and learn more about Playtest Cloud. Welcome to a new episode of Rise and Play, and today I'm super delighted to be with Luna Javier. Luna is one to remember. She's the first female game developer in the Philippines with a career spanning over 20 years. That's crazy when I read that because it's like 20 years. Okay, games were just a rising industry at the time. But then knowing that about you, Luna, is like, wow, I was working with the first female game developer in the Philippines. So I feel very honored to have you on the podcast today. She worked before and began at Anito, working on game Defender Land and Rage, the country's first computer game, and has designed games for Anino Games, Boomzap Entertainment, and Attitude Games. Her latest stop, where she was a design director and co-founder. For me, always when I see women co-founders and having an exit, it's like hats off. Well done, Luna. I think it's important to mention that. Luna is also an international recognized speaker, Game Awards judge and mentor, featured in Women in Gaming, 100 Professionals of Play, book celebrating influential women in the global gaming industry. And of course, actively advocating for inclusivity as Women in Games ambassador, serving on the leadership team of Women in Games Asia. So much activity you have there, supporting a sisterhood, we'll get into that, and in Asia. So again, I'm not familiar with that space at all, but I'm so glad to have you representing here the region. And I hope that it will also make visible the women that I will have in the future on the podcast. And for the context, how we've met. Interesting. We were both actually mentors in the Google Play Indie Games Accelerator. And among the very few women, mentoring and on leadership topics, like, we need to talk to each other. So I remember I reached out to you and I was attending your session. It's like, hey, Luna, how come I didn't know about you? It's like, oh, Sophie, and by the way, I'm looking for a coach. And that's how we started. So we worked together in a coaching format for you to develop, yourself, Rise, like you've been doing the past years. And also you were part of our coaching program with a wonderful woman, started at the beginning of the year with Orin. So without further ado, after this long sharing of mine, welcome Luna to the podcast.
Yeah, so thank you, Sophie. I'm super happy to be here. And it's cool to talk to you in this format because I feel like you and I talk all the time. But to do this where we get to talk a little bit about my journey and my career. And, in the past year, you have been a big part of that for me. So I'm just really grateful and honored to be here with you today.
Honor shared. So let's start with the start because I think this is telling something about you as the first female game developer in the Philippines. Where was the game industry in the Philippines 20 years ago? And what led you to even starting games? Were you working before? So I'm curious how that intersection happened.
Yeah. So when I was in university, there was no game industry. So there were no companies. It wasn't taught in school at all. It just wasn't an option to be a game developer. So that's not what I wanted to do. I was in school to be a filmmaker, to be a screenwriter for film. And I was 100% sure that that's what I wanted to do. And how I ended up in games was there was an ad in the paper after I graduated to be a 3D artist for this company called Anino. And I thought if I got in as a 3D artist, then I could eventually get into Pixar, which was my dream company at the time. And they said in the ad they were a game company. I didn't know what that meant, but I went in, I did 2 weeks of training as a 3D artist. And then my boss said, your 3D art is very bad and you're not going to survive here. But I saw on your resume that you could write. So maybe you want to write for the game that we're doing instead. And so I became a writer for the RPG that we were making, the role playing game. And I fell in love with it. It was just like writing for film, but better because of the interactivity, the multiple endings, and all the world building and all this stuff that I could do. And that's how I fell into game design and game writing. And there were no other companies at the time doing it. And when we released the game in 2003, not only were we, as far as we know, the first company to do that in the country, but we actually won in IGF in San Francisco at GDC. We won for Best in Audio because we used like Filipino native instruments for our music. And so suddenly the Philippines went on the international stage in the same year that we launched the game. And so after us, then other teams started forming companies. And that's really how the Philippine game industry started, was with our team.
Wow. I've seen that phenomenon in a few places where that company is, we call it the academia, forming the other game founders, studios, director when I was at WUGA in Berlin. So I understand that in that context, the same happened with Anino Games. Was it like that alumni cohort that then went on building other game studios and developing the industry?
Oh yeah, like pretty much anybody who is senior has gone through Anino. We used to joke that it was almost like a finishing school. Like you need to go through Anino to learn or unlearn certain things, and then you start off like working in other companies or starting your own teams. And until now, Anino is still around, and it's nice to actually meet people. Like I met someone recently who said she was Anino batch 2017, and I'm like, ow, that hurts my back because I'm like batch 2000. But yeah,
Nice.
it's the Philippine game industry is very small, I would say. And even though there are new developers coming in all the time, people around my age and my generation, we generally know each other.
Yeah. When I was working in 2009, I think, at Gameloft, we were working also with studios in Manila, but more porting studios. So I guess, yeah, it was after that wave where there were other studios forming to help, co-development, supporting development, or porting. Yeah, but also in very bad conditions. I would not use that as an example. So I'm glad to hear also more creative development starting from scratch from the Philippines, which I was not aware of at that time. So I knew, like I said, only the co-development studio. All right. And then as you went with that success, first game studio, games being seen on the international scene, what happened then, the development of your career as you started writer towards more direction of design games. So I'm curious about the journey from that before founding Altitude Games.
Yeah, so unfortunately, there wasn't much work as a game writer specifically. So I learned other hats as well. So I became more of a general designer and also a producer. So I took on a producer role at Anino, especially when Anino became more of an outsourcing service at the time. We were doing like 3D cutscenes for console games, things like that. And then I really missed design. I really missed writing. So I left Anino and was hired by this company called Boomzap Entertainment as a writer also. So Boomzap is registered in Singapore, but it's fully remote. And this was in 2008, I would say. So being fully remote is like crazy. Like nobody was doing it at the time. But that meant that I got to work with people all around Asia. And I started there as a writer and then ended up becoming a designer and actually maybe a producer as well. But I really learned how to work with an international team, work on games that had a Western market because the sadly Anito Defend the Land and Rage, the first Filipino game, it didn't do very well, which is fine. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing really, and we made it very Filipino themed, but learning everything on the job. We didn't know how to market, we didn't know anything like that. And so at Boomzap, I got to work with US publishers and I really learned the business of like PC and mobile gaming. And then I stayed there for a good while. And then in 2014, that's when I left to co-found Altitude Games.
Mm. Through this journey, because you mentioned as being the first female game developer, did you see after you started more women also joining the gaming industry from the Philippines and maybe rising to more roles of responsibility?
Yes, and that was really amazing to watch. So I could see it first in my own teams, having more women come in and then eventually getting promoted to team leads, things like that. In Boomzap, it was a little different. The hierarchy was very flat. And so we hired a lot of women around the region, but not necessarily anyone rising to leadership because there was no middle management in Boomzap. But one story I like to tell is in education. So I also taught game design at university part-time during this period. And on the first day of class, I would always ask, why are you here in game design? Like, why are you taking this class? And there would be a handful of women in my class. And I'm not kidding. The first class I ever got, the girls would stand up and they would say, I took this class because my boyfriend's here, or I took this class because all other electives were full. They didn't really want to be game developers. But throughout the years, I would ask this question to the next batch and the next batch. And then I would start, first of all, getting more female students, but also they would start saying, actually, I've been playing games since I was young and I was thinking about becoming a game developer. Or later on, it became, I really want to be in game development. This is why I signed up for, computer science. And it was just amazing to watch, even anecdotally, more and more women getting into gaming from, the college side, and then seeing that across the industry, more and more women joining like junior level, then eventually rising up and then starting studios as well. So I have, women that I worked with at Boomzap who have started their own gaming studios, and it's just wonderful.
Amazing. And sometimes you have to be the first to show that's possible, even if for you it was not an active process, but the fact that other women could see, oh, okay, it is possible. This is already just planting, the idea to even want it. So I'm very sure you played a part in this, but again, not necessarily directly as this, but just by being. Which year was that? What led you to found Altitude Games? Because today, I think it's just crazy to be founding a studio, but maybe at that time it was just a natural. So I'm curious, where were you in life? What led you to just, okay, let's do it, let's found a studio?
The year that we started discussing starting Altitude with my co-founders was, I would say, maybe the end of 2013. So mobile gaming was not as saturated as it is now, right? At the time, people could still make mobile games with a small team and get moderate success. And I had no plans of being an entrepreneur. It was really more because I was burned out. Like I had been working really hard. And as you know, like game development can be really difficult sometimes with a lot of crunch. And I asked a coworker out for a beer, and I told him that night, I was like, I'm done with games. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm really, really burned out. And I actually told him like, I just want to be a Starbucks barista. Like, I just want to make coffee. Like, I had gone to the Starbucks website to look for openings. I was like, I was ready to leave. And then he said, okay, before you do that, if I start a company tomorrow to make games, would you join me? And I said, you have my resume. Like, let's go. I'll do it with you. Because we made the first game together. We were on Anina together. We were in Boomzap together. And so I had known him and worked with him for over 10 years at that point. And so we thought, okay, who else would we want to make, games with? And so we called up three other people that we had worked with for, through the 10 years. And each one was like a specialist. So I was design, we had engineering, platform art, and then business. So we were five founders. I was the only woman on the team, but it didn't actually matter because I had known them for so long and we all respected each other. We were really good friends too. And so the five of us decided to start a company. It took us a few months to figure out how to do that. And then, yeah, in 2014, we started Altitude Games together.
Wow. That's such a sweet story I hear through this friendship. Almost like an intervention. It's like, wow, wait, before you give up, there's that. And then with a leap of faith, like, okay, let's go. And that's how I hear the stories of quite many companies that went successful in, of course, different definition of success. But I'd say shipping a game together at some point, having an exit, or, making revenues. I started from a very genuine place. That's what I'm hearing through this group. And where was the market at the time? Because starting a studio, I mean, you could have decided to go many directions. So how did you converge to that first game? What happened in the first years of Altitude?
Wanted to do mobile because it was like the most, not common, but everyone was playing mobile games. It seemed like the best way to reach people. And also we had experience doing that. So in Boomsap and in actually two of my co-founders also worked in Gameloft. Like mobile was really a comfortable space for us at the time. And so our first game was the game that we had wanted to make for ourselves. It was a runner called Run Run Super 5. And it was themed in like kind of like a Power Rangers Voltus 5 style. So it was five characters that would, have a giant robot that would form and then you would fight giant kaiju. And it was something that we had grown up with. My generation, we would watch it on TV in the 80s. And so there was a lot of love that went into it. It was original IP in the sense that we made our own characters in this genre. And we made two more games after that were also original IP, like things that we personally really enjoyed. But of course, that was also when the industry started getting really, really competitive. So we didn't have, a big budget for user acquisition. We couldn't really compete with discoverability. And so we decided a few years in to move into work for hire work. So we would have one team that was still working on original IP, but most of the company was doing work for hire work for foreign publishers. We were still doing end-to-end development, and sometimes the pitches came from us. So it was still very creative, but we had to partner with somebody else who had the marketing budget to compete in the mobile space. And so we did that for several years. And then during the pandemic, things got really difficult. A bunch of studios shut down. Sometimes publishers would cancel games and it would have nothing to do with us. It was just, their change in strategy or whatever. And so that's when we seriously started to consider how to keep the team afloat. We didn't want to do layoffs. And so not common knowledge, but that's when we started looking at a possible acquisition.
Before we get to that part, how did you find yourself at the beginning, the development of the first games?
So we put in our own money and we also got investors. Yeah.
Nice. So that's also a good reminder here, because I see in the industry, right? I don't. It's a funny one. When I hear founders talking about starting a studio, the initial first step is I'm going to raise money and then I will start. And sometimes, I find like when you can't put your own money or your time, there's a risk you don't have skin in the game.
No, and thank goodness it wasn't too. After all the horror stories I've heard about VCs, yeah, so they were really just friends of ours, or angel investors. And one thing that I also think was novel at the time was the five co-founders. We all decided to put in the same amount of money, and we all decided that we would make the same amount of money. So all five of us were equal skin in the game, equal pay. And it wasn't weird at the time, but now I'm like, that is exactly how it should be. I feel like, because we really did feel like equals on that leadership team. And it showed also in the level of respect that we had for each other, because no one had a bigger say than anybody else.
Yeah, very good, very good. Okay, and so as you were evaluating the options to exactly keep the studio going forward, acquisition, I know, of course, always this process has its, confidentiality, but for what you can share, I'm more interested in the process of acquisition for whoever wants to be in that process to sell the company. What was the time between the moment you've decided the process, who did what, to be out there on the market to say, hey, we're selling? I'm curious more about the process of it.
Basically, what we did was a change in ownership to a private company. And I can say that we did hire a strategic advisor to help us on our side evaluate options. I think that was a really good investment, because, we didn't know anything about that. And so we had this person who had been with us for several years, actually. And their job was simply to evaluate offers, negotiate contracts, etc. So I would recommend getting a strategic advisor if you don't have one, if you needed help with the business side.
That's a very good one. Yeah, exactly. That was where my question was pointing to, is how does even one start this process when the profile of most game founders, developers are not sellers, M&A, and all those things. This is a very specific skills and more from financial world or investment banking and so on. So, okay. And your journey at Altitude Games, I don't know, of course, how much the steps we can share between a process of acquisition and then acquisition. I'm curious more about the transition also on a cultural level with the team. Are there things, that you could share that help through the transition of acquisition? Because it changes everything, right? I've been part of M&A. So how have you done it? And would you do the same again, or would you do it differently, that you could advise founders in that process as well?
Usually when developers talk about acquisition, they're only thinking about money. They're not thinking about culture. They're not thinking about the impact on the people. I am lucky to have an older sister who works in HR and has handled M&A. So she would give me unofficial advice before, not specific to my experience, but she had just mentioned that when two companies merge, regardless of the details of the merge, HR plays such a big role in making sure that everyone feels supported on both sides. And so one of our non-negotiables was to explain that culture was really important to us and we didn't want our culture to change. So Altitude, I think the reason that people stay with us for so long, and we have people, 10 years over that have stayed with us, is people genuinely love working there. I keep saying us because I just left Altitude. I'm not used to saying them. But yeah, so people really genuinely love working at Altitude and the people that they work with. And that was something that we were not willing to sacrifice, regardless of the offer. And so we had a lot of discussions about culture. We also had a really strong HR manager, and we made sure to explain to everybody our reasons, just to make sure everybody had the information and the answers that they needed, just to support them. And acquisition takes months of work, but only the leadership team knows about that. And so when your team finds out, of course they're going to panic, and you really have to make sure that everybody understands why this is a good thing. And I would do it again because it was the best decision that we could have made at the time.
Yeah. And it was very thoughtful. I know I've been part of some of those M&A during and after, and this is one of the main point of conflict, and sometimes where it just doesn't work out at all. The studio acquired shuts down because there's just too much difference, but it's part of the due diligence and the merger process. And more curious about your personal journey. So I don't know how long was your journey at Altitude before you decided to explore, new opportunities, your new chapter? I'll start with this because, again, here it's not about the specific case, but it's more the commonalities I see in founders and for acquisition. So I'll share what I've seen, what I've experienced myself. We share a story like many founders. You started from a completely different place, which was aspiration, a group of friends working together, fulfilling your dreams, creating the workplace that you dreamed of having, all those things. And then there's the reality of a business where you make financial choice, you make it viable and be aligned with the direction of the market. And I've seen over and over again founders post-acquisition having a hard time finding their place because it's a different setup, through an acquisition, like just purely from a financial lens. An acquirer is looking to grow value through an acquisition. So you grow value either by growing the revenues or the value of a company, so the margin, the revenues, or what we call acquire, right? So suddenly the pool of talents is increased, and then so there are different reasons why someone would acquire. And that is really hard to align with the initial aspiration of founders. So what I wanted to ask you is, in this process, what keeps you keeping the eyes on the prize or, the North Star? Because it's a reality for many founders. And eventually it's expected that they leave because they had to start the company. It's not there anymore. So it's a very known fact. It's not about your case. I wanted to point it out. It's in the books. It's in the interview of founders. But I'm more curious about your personal experience there.
Yeah, so for me, actually, my 4 co-founders had left throughout the 11 years that I was there. So it got to the point that I was the only founder left. Having a change in ownership, being a founder almost didn't matter. I removed it actually from my title. I was just design director. I would no longer say co-founder because technically I didn't co-found the new version of us. And so I was just part of the leadership team, just one of several people trying to, make the best products possible. And so I did find my place. The thing that I had to adjust was because I wasn't a founder, I didn't need to be in everyone's business. Because when we were a founder, when we were like a small company and, kind of like a scrappy little team, we helped out everywhere. And I had to learn what it meant to really only focus on design. And that was actually a welcome change in the sense that I could really practice my craft and just focus on that and focus on, mentoring my own design team and not necessarily having to deal with any of the fires outside my department. So I think that was the biggest change for me. I did feel lonely after my co-founders had left, for sure. And they all had their different reasons. And it just got to a point where I found my reason, which was I wanted to do something else. And when you're a director for as long as I have been, I wasn't even making games anymore personally. I had an excellent design team, spread out across different games that were making games, and I just advised. And that's fine. My itch at the start to make mobile games with friends, it was actually the same, except I wasn't in Unity doing it. Right. But I was still surrounded by friends. We were still having fun and being creative and solving problems together. But I did miss my co-founders for sure because, even now, some of them are in different countries and, we don't necessarily keep in touch as often. So I think that's the big change also for me.
Was there a conflict there for you, which is, again, a common one, between being an employee and an entrepreneur? Because an entrepreneur, you basically have most of your ownership. You decide on your time, where you go, and you have a lot of control. And when you are an employee, you work for higher goals that you don't necessarily have always a say. So was that something difficult for you?
I thought it would be difficult to not be a founder or an owner, but I think I genuinely cared more about the work and the team than that part. Because again, when we started Altitude, I didn't even know what being a founder meant. It's not like I dreamt of, being a founder, being an entrepreneur. Like I really shied away from anything business related. Like our CEO would handle all of that. So I told him that night when we were having that beer, I said, I don't want to do anything about the business or money. I just want to design games. And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm here for. You go and design games. And that's all I wanted to do. And so because I was still doing that, I don't think it was difficult.
Okay, good to know. That's again a very personal question that really depends on, again, things we touch through our coaching. You know, who you are, what makes you tick, what makes you feel alive, and yeah, what fills your cup. So I was curious to hear what was there for you. All right, so I'm now eager to ask about what's next for you. So we've been on a journey, a fantastic journey with Orin. Well, it would be probably a very long podcast to go through all the things we've experienced together. I want to take a moment as well for reflection for you through our coaching journey. So it's about you, Luna. What have you learned about yourself? What emerged for you that you take with you now in this phase of your life, and where you're going next?
Yeah, wow. How to summarize? I joined Orin because I wanted to know who I was outside of Altitude. I knew that I would leave at some point, but being this co-founder and being the public face of Altitude, for a long time, I didn't know who I was outside of it. It had become really almost like a comfort zone for me. And when I realized that my job is a job, it's not my identity, and that I could be anything, that kind of freedom at first was really overwhelming. But through Orin and our coaching, it's actually the opposite. I feel more myself than when I started, because when I started, there were expectations of me, expectations of my day to day work, being in leadership, expectations of people from the leadership team, from the owner, from people under me. And now, as just myself, no one expects me to do anything. In fact, people were almost like taking bets, like they were trying to guess what I would do next. So so people would tell me like, I bet you're gonna like run for office or be a professor or write a book, or like they had this like, be a dance teacher, like all sorts of like, they had a long list for me. And it was fun because I'm like, I could be any of those things or none of those things, but I'm gonna do what feels right to me. And I know that that changes too, because what I wanted 6 months ago is not what I wanted now. And just accepting myself completely is what I learned from Orin, I think, the most.
Yeah. And that's is leadership, by the way. You know, we always start with the door of business leadership, but the whole process, like when I say leadership, conscious, growing a team in a human-centered way, it's about knowing yourself and having the courage to be yourself, like from the right place. So yeah, with what you've learned today, is there something you can reveal more? Where's your curiosity going? Things you want to explore in the coming month?
Well, it's week 3 of me being independent, and I already have 2 schools that I might teach at. I'm already doing UX review for another game.
Wow.
I've given one talk, and I'm giving another talk and another workshop and mentoring for a company also. And these are things that I didn't necessarily look for, but also I wouldn't say I'm lucky, because I know that these opportunities came because of the hard work that I've done and my reputation, and people found out that I was free, and suddenly, they're all here. And so I am grateful that I have all of these, and I will do these until I figure out what's next, because this might be what's next. Like me doing multiple things. I'm doing a bunch of Women in Games Asia activities too. And so maybe this is what I need to be right now, is helping people in multiple ways, small ways or big ways, rather than just one thing. Like this is Luna's job from 9 to 5. Like, I don't know if I want to be that right now.
It's amazing. I'm so happy for you. And here, this is very clear that you have a market demand coming to you. You know, you have a wealth of knowledge, experience, the transformation, what you had to go through to, you know, from being the first female game developer, designer, founding a studio, selling the studio, going through all the journey. This is the value that, you know, the market demands. So I'm not surprised. And it's just reflecting, you know, where you can create value, you can keep creating value. And then it's more your decision, of course, if you want to do it and in which capacity. But it sounds really exciting. I'm so happy for you. So I've covered for me the most part, but is there something I didn't ask you that you wanted to share?
Yeah, so I think what was crucial for me was getting a professional coach. So I used to say in talks, whenever I would talk about my journey as a female leader in the Philippine gaming industry, that my mentors had always been male. I had not been fortunate enough to work with a woman that was more senior than me that I could ask advice from. And I would say in talks, if anybody knows a female mentor, like for me, I totally want one. Like I would manifest it to nobody in particular. And then you approached me during, IGA. And I remember when we had our intro call, I was like, this is what I need. And the fact that I met you, I was 42 when I met you. And so what I would encourage, people now, especially women who are listening, is, to find a female mentor or support system or coach if you can get a coach. It's never too late to ask for help, regardless of where you are in your career, because getting coaching through you, Sophie, and then through Orion as a group really changed my life for the better. And that never would have happened if I felt like, oh, but I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. Why would I need coaching? But I desperately needed coaching, and I still do. And so I think people reaching out to ask for help this way, it will only be good for you. So I hope that that would be helpful to your listeners.
Important message. Thank you for highlighting it. Yes. And the hardest one you mentioned, asking for help. I've been in that situation. I was also in the dark. Like I noticed something in common for the Orion women. We are survivors by almost design. We've been pushing, breaking walls by ourselves, and this is our MO. We just know how to work this way. And then the moment we need help, get some help is just very unnatural. It's unnatural and it's scary, and it's I'm not weak, I'm not vulnerable. So, and it's a limiting factor. So very important that you mentioned that, and especially for women who have been survivors to grow through their life, that at some point they can also receive the hands of other women survivors and leaders, because we have so much more we can offer to each other. Well, thank you very much, Luna. It was a beautiful time for us to reflect, and it comes at the perfect time where we're also closing at least the Orange chapter together. But it's the beginning of new exciting things for you and that phase of life, for the next a good decade at least. So I'm so happy for you.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you for helping me get here. Really, I'm very, very grateful to you.
Yeah. Take care, Luna. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. We keep growing our community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. If you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders, because we have so much more we can learn from each other. And if you want to accelerate your growth, I offer creative leadership coaching and workshop, plus other free resources that you can find on riseandplay.io.